All right, so this week we're going to learn about the power of speech. It's very connected to the time of year that we're in. Every yontif is connected to another part of our body. The yontif of Pesach is connected to the mouth. You see, all the mitzvahs of Pesach have to do with the mouth. It's a mitzvah to eat matzah, it's a mitzvah not to eat chametz, it's a mitzvah to say the Haggadah. Every yontif has another limb of the body is connected to. Yom Kippur has to do with our connection to Hashem, has to do with our heart. Rosh Hashanah, it's a mitzvah to hear the shofar. On Chanukah, you're supposed to see the menorah. So, on Pesach, the main mitzvah is with our mouth. And we see this also in the parshas that we read around the time of Pesach. We're reading now Tazria Metzora, which talks about the punishment. The punishments for Lashon Hara. We read about Parsha Shmini talks about the laws about what we are permitted to eat, we're not allowed to eat. So it talks about what goes into our mouth, and Tazria Metzora talks about what goes out of our mouth, what we speak about. So the reason why Pesach is connected to our mouth, first of all, the word Pesach itself is made up of the word Pesach. The mouth speaks. It's connected to the mouth because it says in the Kabbalah, the Rizal writes that the Rizal says that before the redemption from Egypt, Moshe Rabbeinu's speech was in exile. Moshe Rabbeinu was heavy-tongued; he wasn't able to speak, and the reason he wasn't able to speak is because the Jewish people in general were missing; they were deficient in the area of speech. That's because we were not giving it the Torah yet. So we didn't really have a clear usage for our mouth. We didn't have our mouth was in exile, meaning the Jewish mouth is connected to Torah, and that wasn't possible yet because we were still in exile. So until Moshe Rabbeinu redeemed us from Egypt, and we went to go out of Egypt, then we got a connection to holy tongue, to Jewish tongue. Until then, there's this exile of the mouth. That's why Pesach is connected to redemption of the mouth, and that's why the parshas around Pesach are also connected to the mouth. Okay, so there is a great power in the words that we say in many areas in our life. First of all, there's great power in the impact that our words have in heaven. The previous Rebbe writes the following story. He said that doesn't say where it was. He said there was this town that had a drought, and people in the town made a fast to ask God to bring rain, and they're fasting and they're asking and they're begging, and there's no rain. So there's one lady who comes in the shul, and she doesn't know exactly what's going on. She asks, "What's going on, guys? What's everyone praying about today?" They tell her, it's a very simple lady. They tell her, "Well, there's no rain, and we want there to be rain." She says, "Oh my God, what's the matter with you?" She tells God, "I have a bunch of children, and when they want something, I have to give in to them. When they cry to me, I have to give in. You have so many children. All they want is rain. Can't you answer them?" So it wasn't like immediately there was rain, but the decree was annulled. It was her words that annulled the decree. It wasn't the words of the prayers of everybody else. It was just her words said it with sincerity that made that impact in Shemayim. So we see how our words have a tremendous impact in how they affect God. It's also a vart from Rebbe Marash, I think I shared with you last year. The Rebbe Marash writes like this. It's based upon a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says that on Pirkei Avos it says you have to know before whom you're going to have to give an accounting. It says in Pirkei Avos, you should know there's an eye that sees, there's the ear that hears, and you have to know you're going to have to give an accounting in front of the one. So the word the Torah uses for accounting is judgment and account. Din v'chashbon, judgment and account. And it's a very funny wording because usually there's an accounting, there's a reckoning, they figure it out, there's a court case, and then there's a judgment. But in Pirkei Avos it says first the word judgment, then the word account. So the Baal Shem Tov says that what happens in Shemayim is that they show you a DVD of your life, except they hide the main character, they don't tell you it's you. and they say, what do you think about this guy? What should happen to this guy? So you're very objective, and you're like, well, that guy, what he did that, who knows what should happen to him? Oh, well, he did one. What? That's pretty good. What he should. So the reason they do this is because the heavenly court is made up of angels. Angels cannot say anything about souls. Souls are on a higher level than angels. So in order for the angels to have some jurisdiction over our future, we have to weigh in. And therefore, there is a judgment that we give ourselves. And then the heavenly court says, okay, you gave that judgment, so let's make a calculation. You made this judgment, so the calculation is, this is what happened to you. This is what you actually did yourself. And therefore, this should be the proper response from heaven. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. The Rash says it also works as when we're alive. That means you don't have to wait until Chas v'Shalom pass away for what your words to have that impact. If you say, Yankel, you're such a tzaddik, what look what Yankel did, God should just bless that guy and pour brachas upon him. So Hashem says, oh, that's what he said about Yankel? Oh, that's what should happen to you. When you say that this person deserves good in this world, you say, well, anti-Yankel too, for sure. The Friedrich Rebbe says that the greatest prayers ever uttered were uttered by a man named Rabbi Yishmael, the Kohen Gadol, and they were said on Yom Kippur. And the Friedrich Rebbe says, when a Jew wishes another Jew well, God accepts that prayer like the prayers of Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur. So since you mentioned that, let's take a say l'chaim for Mechob and Miriam. We're going to have an operation this week. Should be gesund and stark and freilich and have a lot of and have only bracha and simcha in every way. L'chaim. Okay, thank you, Michal David Freeman, for giving me regards from JetBlue free Wi-Fi. Okay, that's really great, by the way. You know, you have free Wi-Fi, just use it just because it's free. It's amazing, even though it's not that expensive. But when it's free, you use it. Okay, so our words have this tremendous impact on God. They make God respond to us. We say this is what should happen, and Hashem responds to us. But besides the impact that our words have on God, our words have a great impact on ourselves too. The Rambam writes that there are actually 5 categories of speech. Our words are very important, and you would think, okay, so our words are so important, so it seems like pretty scary picture. So what are you supposed to speak? Just Torah all day, and that's it? It's just Torah? I mean, like, what are you allowed to talk about already? According to Judaism, our words are so powerful, what should we talk about? There seems to be all these laws about this. The Rambam actually writes as 5 categories of speech. 5 categories are as follows. There are words that we say that are mitzvahs, like brachas, davening, benching. There's words you say that are forbidden, like lashon hara, rechilus. Rechilus is a little tricky one. Rechilus means to repeat a conversation without permission. It's not because you said something bad about that person, just you repeated a conversation without permission, without any negative impact. Just you need permission to repeat that conversation. You let words travel. That's called rechilus. That's forbidden. Then there's another category called reshus. Reshus means you talk about things that have benefit. Your husband comes home and asks you, well, I made this investment, what do you think? This is where my money is going now, this is what's happening, this is going up, this is going down, who's picking up the kids tomorrow? And you discuss, whatever, you're just trying to figure out how to do stuff. So those are mundane things that you're allowed to talk about. Then the Rambam writes, words that are beloved. What are beloved words? Wise things that you learn from. In other words, you talk about something that you can actually learn from, like doesn't necessarily have to be Torah, just like something wise that you learn from. You're trying to become better at a certain field, certain skill, so you're learning about this, or something that's just intelligent that teaches you something. Those are called, Rambam writes, dibur ha'ov, beloved words. And then the Rambam writes there are words which are called dibur ha'mois, things which are not very pleasant. And what are those words? Those are words which have no benefit. They're not bad words, they're not evil, they're not forbidden, they're just words that have no benefit. So the Torah says you don't have to only say Torah all day, but your words should lead somewhere. Your words should try to help something happen. But the 5th category that the Rambam is talking about, words that you say that if you wouldn't have said them, nothing would have happened. In other words, those are the words the Rambam says are not very nice words. So our words have a great impact both on heaven and on earth, on ourselves and people around us. We see this by the laws of tzaras. God's laws of tzaras. It's very interesting. People always say, well, if I do this, will I get zapped by lightning? Right? If I break Shabbos, I get zapped by lightning. So there's no prohibition in the Torah where we find like this response in heaven. They get zapped. L'chaim to you, Ezra. L'chaim uracha. Thank you for l'chaim. And Michal David, enjoy your 7 mini bags of Terra chips. Okay, so it's a great thing to have in Japan. Okay, fine. So unlike United. Okay, fine. So what category is that? Okay, fine. We see by the laws of Nagoyim, the laws of diseases, tsaras is not what people call leprosy. It's a special heaven-sent disease that we don't have nowadays as a punishment for speaking Lashon Hara. It's the only thing we find that is a direct response from God in this world as a result of doing something. So we see that like God really cares about the words you say, and the only thing He responds immediately, hard and fast, is with saying something negative about somebody. So we see that this is something that Hashem just can't tolerate, and He gives us immediate response. And we also see from the way that this disease happens, the way that speech develops. What do I mean? How does tsaras work? The way tsaras works is like this. The Rambam writes, a person comes home and he sees some red or green on his house. So, what does that mean? He calls the kohen. Is this tsaras? It's tsaras. Okay, I've got to remove that part of the house. You got to put the plaster. If it returns again, the whole house is destroyed. What happens if a person doesn't stop saying Lashon Hara and it comes on his clothing? It doesn't stop and then it goes on himself. So it continues by degree. And God gives a person a lot of warnings, and if it doesn't stop, then it goes further and further. So there's a similar characteristic about speech. The words that we say affect the way we think and feel. Not only do our words affect other people, but our words affect ourselves. Our words affect ourselves, how we think, how we feel, how we look at life. So just like there's stages in how the disease affects the house and the clothing and the person, so too do our words bring us to places that we may have never thought we would go to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions before we continue? Yeah, go ahead.
About the 5 categories that you were talking about, where does joking fall?
That's a good question. Okay, so it depends what the joke is for. It says in the Gemara that Rava would say a joke for giving a class, and the Alter Rebbe brings us in Tanya. There's actually two different versions of this statement of the Talmud. One is Rava would say a joke before giving a class. The other is that Rava would say a joke before giving a class. And the less common version is that Rava would say the joke. And the Alter Rebbe chooses that uncommon text in the Talmud because Rava was so gifted with his words that it says his words were like juicy pieces of steak. So you would think like he doesn't need to say a joke. But even though his words were so delicious, he still felt that in order to crack the ice with his students, he had to say a joke to make the words go over well. So if the joke has a benefit for Rava in giving over his words, then the joke is beneficial. If the joke helps if the joke has a purpose, the joke has a benefit, then the joke is beneficial. But if the joke is on someone else's expense, obviously it's not a good idea. Does that answer your question? Not really. Where's Rabbi Greenglass Olav Shalom? He was a mashpia in Montreal. He asked the previous Rebbe, I think it was the previous Rebbe, for a tikkun for words that he was saying. He used to always make jokes, and I think the previous Rebbe told him he should use it for holiness. He used to always make jokes. He used to always joke around like he had very impish kind of humor. He used to study with students. And if it was hot, Rabbi Greenglass, we can't learn here. It's too hot. So how are you going to handle Gehenna? Whatever. That was his. So it depends on the goal of the joke. So our words have an effect on ourselves, how we feel. And they have an effect on how Hashem responds to us. I want to tell you this amazing story that really brings us home. The story is like this. There was, in Russia, people living under Stalin, knew that they would never get out of Russia, or according to any natural means. There's an iron curtain, you're stuck there, you couldn't get out. But in 1946, after the war, Poland asked to bring back its citizens, and people with Polish passports were allowed to leave Russia. So Beryl and Chana Gurevich just got married, and they wanted to leave Russia. They didn't have Polish passports, but that wasn't such a big deal. Have somebody make a false passport with a false ID, as many Chassidim did. And so Chana Gurevich had a passport, but Beryl did not have a passport. He's a very special Jew. He was the head of the yeshiva, the women's yeshiva in years in France. I studied with him a little bit when I was studying in yeshiva in Blois. Very special Jew. Anyway, so he went with his Kala. They're traveling out of Russia, and his Kala had a passport. He didn't have a passport, and they're arriving at the border. And someone was supposed to bring him a passport by the border, and the person who's supposed to bring him the passport doesn't show up. Okay. So they're by the border, and so they know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that Beryl's going to be sent to Siberia for a couple of years, and his wife is going to be allowed to go to Poland. So maybe he should give her a divorce, just to let her go. She shouldn't get stuck with this or with her husband and be in a guna and never know what's going to happen to her husband. So maybe he should give her a divorce. So the Chassidus discussing he should give her a divorce, he shouldn't give her a divorce, but no one knew how to write a divorce on the train. So he couldn't really give a divorce. So, okay, so they get to the separated. He gets sent to Siberia. She gets led into Poland, and eventually she moves from Poland to another city, until she ends up in France. So she used to cry and cry and cry every day, and she had a neighbor named Rabbi Yitzchak Golden. Yitzchak Golden, every morning he would tell her, he's going to get out. I'm telling you, your husband's going to make it out. He's going to be okay. You're going to see your husband. You don't have to cry. He's going to make it out. And this was like so reviving for her. This just revived her. How did he know she was going to make it out? How did he know that? He didn't know. He does. What does it cost to give a bracha? What does it cost to open up the door? So he used to tell us that every morning he used to go to work. She used to get up and meet him outside at 10 to 8 every morning just to hear him say it. And every morning he would say this to her, you're going to find your husband, and this really revived her. In 1948, some kind of deal that Poland made with Russia, and they allowed 8 people to return to Poland. Who were the 8 people? Of those 8 people, they let Beryl Gurevich return to Poland. What are the chances of that? So he comes to Krakow, and he wants to find his wife. But how could he find his wife? Where'd she go? It wasn't like he just posted on Facebook in those days. So what's he going to do? So he asked people in town, anybody know about this group? Came Chassidim, the Chabad Chassidim, they came there. And I don't know which question you're talking about. So she's trying to find. One guy says, I remember that group. I don't know where they went now. But I remember one guy from the group, his name was Yitzchak Golden. I know that guy. I know where he went. So ask him, maybe he knows where your wife is. So he sends a letter to Yitzchak Golden in France. Hey, what's going on? Do you know this lady named Chana Gurevich? Do you know where she might be right now? Because her husband just came out of Russia, and he wants to find her. So Yitzchak Golden, he got to be the shliach. He got to be the one to tell his wife, your husband is free and is on his way to sea. He was the one who was encouraging her. He was the one who was giving her those positive words, and he was the one who God said, okay, you tell her. You got to encourage her all this time. Give her the good news. And Baruch Hashem, they were reunited, and as a result of just positive words said with emunah, said with strength, and opened the door in heaven and opened the door on earth and made the brachas come down. So our words that we say have an effect on Hashem, but they also affect on us. And the Rambam writes, for example, that if you get upset, what should you do? You get upset, the Rambam writes, you get angry, what should you do? This is contrary to a lot of, not all of psychology. More modern psychology has some opinions that agree with the Rambam, but some people say that if you get angry, you should express your anger, you should talk about your anger. And the Rambam says, be quiet, don't say anything. When people hear this, you know what happens? They get very angry. How can you not express it? Just get angry, let's talk about it. But what happens is, the Rambam says, is that you're not actually letting it out, you're building it up, and you're making it more real. And the best thing to do is, if you get angry, is just to be quiet until the feeling subsides. What happens is, when you're quiet, when you talk about it, you make it more of a thing. When you're quiet, that causes that feeling to slowly simmer down, and it works. A friend of mine, the Rebbe, told us to wait for a minute before he responds. So when he was running a yeshiva, and when people in the yeshiva were asking him all kinds of crazy questions, because of different backgrounds they came from, and there are a lot of interesting, colorful characters. So he asked him, "What do I do?" And the Rebbe told him to study Chassidus that talks about divine providence, as that softens up your natural character. And then he told him, wait for a minute before responding. So our words affect our feelings. Now this also works not just in the negative, also in the positive. The Rebbe Rashab writes, words have a very powerful effect on your feelings. When you express your love for someone, when you say how much you love someone, that makes your feelings of love more real. When you say it, just say the words that you say you love someone, the Rebbe Rashab writes, it illuminates your feelings. You have those feelings anyways, but by saying those words, it makes those feelings more real. It starts off, though, with our eyes. In Hebrew, the word for nega means disease. In Sefer Yetzirah, it writes, there's nothing lower than disease. But then it writes, there's nothing higher than oneg. Oneg means pleasure. The word for disease and the word for pleasure have the same letters, except there's one difference. In the word disease, the ayin is at the end of the word. In the word for pleasure, the ayin is always the way in the right, in the beginning of the word. So it says like this in the Torah. The Torah says, the kohen comes to see if the person's disease, if the color of the disease has changed. Now the usual word for color in Hebrew is tzeva. But here the Torah uses the word einoi. The kohen comes to see, has the ayin, has a color changed. The Torah, why does the Torah use the word einoi, has the ayin changed? To say has a tzeva changed. Why does the Torah use this funny word? So one explanation is like this. What's the root of the way we speak about people? Where does it start from? It starts from the way we look at them. If you look with the left eye, if your ayin also means eye. If your eye is on the left, if your flashlight that you're looking at another person, that you're focusing on that other person is with your left eye, so then your life is, even before anything happens from heaven, just your life is just not pleasurable. It's not just an enjoyable life. Then there's nega. But if the kohen comes to see, has your ayin changed? Have you moved your eye from the left to the right? Have you are able to look positively at people? Then your life is owning and it's pleasurable. It starts the way that you look at people is the way that you end up talking about them. But it also works the other way around. By talking positively about people, it helps you also feel better about people. One of the things that we can never really recover is our words. As the Gemara says, words are like an arrow. Once you say them, they're gone, and they cause all kinds of havoc that you never meant in the first place. But that's once you've said them already. But the key is not about understanding the negative impacts of our words, but to understand the positive impact of saying good things, and the little light pushes away a lot of darkness. Today is the 28th day of Nisan. It's the day when the Rebbe told each of us that I've done all I can to bring Mashiach. I'm giving this over to you. Now do everything that you can to bring Mashiach. The next Shabbos, the Rebbe began the campaign of studying about Mashiach, talking about Mashiach. What happens is when you talk about something, it makes it real to you. It says we had in Haftorah a few weeks ago, they lost their faith, it was cut off from their lips. What makes you lose your faith in something? You don't talk about it. It's not that you don't believe in it. Just because you don't, your words have a big effect on how you feel. You talk about Mashiach, and Mashiach becomes much more, your belief in Mashiach becomes much more real and lebendig and vibrant. And so the Rebbe is telling us to do everything we can to bring Mashiach. One important thing that we could do, the Rebbe began the campaign then, was to study about Mashiach, to learn about it, and to make it real, and to bring it into our homes, and to, especially today we lost Rabbi Ruddle, who really put his neshama into his emunah b'yis Mashiach. And how many people do you know that have a suitcase ready with their Shabbos clothing? Just they're ready. He has a suitcase ready to take out his Shabbos clothing to greet Mashiach. So I think a great thing to begin. It's amazing that his passing is today, the 20th day of this, and do everything you can to bring Mashiach. And this is what his life is all about. So l'chaim, we should speak about good things, speak positively, speak words of affection, of faith. Let's talk about Mashiach. We should see Mashiach now. L'chaim, chaim v'rach. Any questions, comments, criticism, tomatoes, cucumbers?